Now, there are lots of big news stories around today, but if you're a conservative and you love former President Donald Trump, well, you may have chosen to ditch the Taylor Swift concert and head over to CPAC, that is the Conservative Political Action Conference in Maryland. Now, an anonymous specky writer did go there and they wrote a raving review on Flat White saying that the standouts were Trump and Argentina's President Javier Milei. Terry, surely a bit of enthusiasm for conservative politics in the wasteland of Biden's America is a good news story.
Well, I think if you put it that way, yes, it is. And certainly I think that the CPAC conference gave Donald Trump a platform going into the latest round of primaries that actually suited him well. But look, again, I don't dismiss what the dissident damsel had to say. And in fact, I think the colour of her piece was actually very enjoyable and very, well, actually very insightful. But do I think that Donald Trump is the be-all and end-all? No, I don't. Do I think that CPAC conservatism is the definition of modern conservatism? No, I don't. But I think forums like CPAC, both in the US and Australia, are actually important in terms of being able to have these conversations, being able to, well, have people of a conservative or a libertarian or certainly a more right of centre point of view coming out of the woodwork. You know, we termites, we come out of the woodwork. Yeah, we're going to undermine those liberals, aren't we? But
the good news is,
I think
the good news is, Terry, the people who are most popular at that event are people like Javier Milei, who are selling old school economic conservative politics. Here's a quick clip from Javier Milei now.
En definitiva, el mensaje es el siguiente.
So the message is this:
no dejen avanzar el socialismo.
Don't let socialism advance.
No avalen la regulación.
Don't endorse regulation.
No avalen la idea de los fallos de mercado.
Don't endorse the idea of market failure.
No permitan el avance de la agenda asesina.
Don't allow the advance of the murderous agenda.
Y no se dejen llevar por los cantos de sirena de la justicia social.
And don't let the siren calls of social justice woo you.
I don't know, Terry, I'd vote for him.
Well, I certainly vote for those messages, absolutely and totally. And certainly I think that Javier Milei, and I wish I could say it with a Spanish accent because I love that accent, Javier Milei, is on the money. And I think I wish him well. I actually do wish him well in relation to the challenge, the humongous challenge he has in Argentina. And certainly I think that type of, if you like, mainstream centre-right, economically liberal but socially conservative thought is what, in my view, conservatism these days is all about. Not populism, not saying what people want to hear, not playing personality politics, not playing identity politics, but actually getting back to the fundamentals of what we are as a society and how do we make it better without government feeling that it has to do all the work. In fact, that government should not be doing much of the work at all, should it? And certainly I'm of a certain age, you're not. I go back to Ronald Reagan's time, and I think, again, a president or a leadership like that on the right of centre that basically enables people to be the best of what they can be is what conservatism should be about these days. And I think those politicians in the US, in the UK, in Australia, around the West who can subscribe to that are the ones that I back and support.
Well, of course, there are big stars at CPAC who are a little bit further to the right. Let's have a look at a few quick clips. We had the War Room Steve Bannon.
Today, in this very hall, the greatest president of the 20th and 21st century sat here and said he's a political dissident. He's persecuted. That is a mark upon our country because it's absolutely true, 100% true. And why is he a dissident? You know why? Because he gave us 3 years of peace and prosperity.
And then we have the former President Donald Trump himself, who looks like he may actually be the next president.
I've been indicted more than Alphonse Capone, Mr. President. Do you know who that is? Even the president just said, I do. Scarface, Al Capone. If he had dinner with you and he didn't like the smile on your face, he thought you were mocking him by smiling, you would be dead before you got home and said hello to your wife. and Alphonse Capone. I got indicted 4 times by this gang of thugs for nothing, or, as I say respectfully to the people from foreign countries, for bullshit.
What do you reckon, Terry? Is that the next president of the United States?
Well, I think Mr. Trump needs to keep in mind that Al Capone was actually brought down by a tax charge rather than being a gangster. So, but seriously, look, I think Steve Bannon actually did make some sense there, except for his point about Donald Trump being the greatest president of the 20th century. I think there are a couple of other candidates I would put ahead of him, including certainly the first Roosevelt, if not the second. But having said that, I think his call to arms to the right of centre in the United States is resonating. And I think the lawfare against him from Democratic-inspired or Democratic politicians is actually contributing. It's making him stronger. It's not kryptonite. It's actually making him stronger, not weaker. And the bandwagon is continuing to roll, as we saw in the Michigan primary the other day. And I think poor old Nikki Haley, as the last person standing besides Mr. Trump, has got a few problems. But certainly I think CPAC is a good love fest for the people on the right. But I think we need to have that conversation about what is conservatism, what do conservatives stand for, what are the values that we want to promote, what are the values we want people to actually buy and by voting for them. And I think that conversation is being put aside far too much for populism and personality politics. And if I have a criticism of Donald Trump, it is that.
Well, I think that's a good point to make, but also we have to move on because there's some very big news in Australia this week. ASIO has been trending since Thursday, and the reason is that they have revealed an unnamed traitor, their words not mine, a retired politician who they believe was cultivated by foreign spies. Now, ASIO boss Mike Burgess has said that a politician has, quote, sold out their country, their party, then to foreign colleagues and advances the interests of a foreign regime. Now, the former Liberal Treasurer Joe Hockey has said to the ABC that he wants ASIO to name the minister, not only because it is believed he may have committed a serious crime, not under new laws but under the old laws, but also because Joe Hockey says this has left an air of suspicion over all former ministers. What do you make of that, Terry? Should ASIO name the politician involved?
Well, certainly I think Mike Burgess, as the Director General of ASIO, knew exactly what he was doing when he made those comments on releasing the annual threat assessment report. And I think having done that, he should have anticipated the firestorm that was to follow. In terms of what Joe Hockey said, I fully agree. I mean, there are 99.9999999 political people, whether they're MPs or political staffers or political operatives in political parties, are actually wanting to do the right thing by Australia in one way or another. We may disagree on what that thing may be across the political aisle, but basically I think everybody is here for Australia and people are loyal to Australia. And if this particular former politician is besmirching the reputations by implication of all people involved in politics in Australia, or certainly parliamentary politics, I think it's legitimate to call for his name. I noticed that on 2GB, talking to Ray Hadley on Thursday, Peter Dutton, I think, came very close to naming who he had in mind, and I don't think we should do that here. And certainly that name has been speculated all over the Twitterverse, particularly since. But having said that, there could be any number of potential candidates for this particular unwanted Guernsey. But certainly, I really do think that having put that out there, Mr. Burgess, as Director General of ASIO, has identified a threat. Yes, he said that the law as it was at the time was a loophole for this person, but certainly the foreign influence laws that the coalition government put in, and yes, they have had their problems, including, I think, as I recall, discriminating against Tony Abbott and the organisers of CPAC Australia.
That was the first application of the foreign interference laws.
I know.
Now,
I think the principle and the intention behind them is right. And I think if that politician is sheltering behind a loophole, they should actually be dragged out kicking and screaming from that loophole and exposed to the light of day.
Well, I mean, by not naming them, what might happen is more than one name might pop up inadvertently. Now, before we move to our last topic, I'm just going to read Joe Hockey's statement because I think it's important to have it on the record. He said, and I quote, "For a start, the former politician is a traitor. It wasn't an allegation by the head of our intelligence agency. It was a statement of fact. It is absolutely inconceivable that you would have a former politician representing their community, representing their country, who then goes and engages with a foreign adversary and somehow they're allowed to walk off into the sunset without having their name or reputation revealed. It makes us all question as representatives in the parliament who we can trust, who of our current and former colleagues can we trust, and that is ridiculous," end quote.
And should I add, walking into the sunset with their parliamentary pension, Alexandra. So basically the taxpayers actually giving them, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to nick off when they've done that, done the dirty on Australians generally and certainly the Australian political system. I think it's reprehensible. That person should be outed in some way.
Well, I agree. Now, look, there's another huge global story right now about subversion, and that is in the field of racist AI. Terry, those chatbots which generated answers to questions and they fabricate images on demand, they got caught out exhibiting some extreme woke biases. They did everything from changing the race of America's founding fathers to making history's popes into black women. If you want to see the photograph of some Vikings, you're going to get black men, certainly no Nordics. It has also generated highly defamatory statements about politicians and public figures from conservative movements who are threatening to sue Google for these statements. Now, it was only after Elon Musk called Google out over it that they admitted their algorithms were actively racist. What does that say about the future of AI and our dependency on computers for information if we already have, in the opening days, woke racism and bias infiltrating our new digital world?
Well, it's a very good point. And I think the fact that increasingly AI-generated content is hard to tell from real content, I think is a real concern because I don't think, look, I'm a AI Neanderthal. I don't understand it. I've never played with it. I've heard about Chat GPT, but I wouldn't have a clue how it works except what I've seen. It scares the pants off me, especially as a so-called creative. Well, my wife doesn't think I'm creative at all, but look, I write stuff. So if somebody can write in my style through an artificial intelligence program and actually say black is white when I would say white is black, that's my reputation at stake. That's my integrity at stake. It's your integrity when it's your work. That sort of thing really concerns me. When it comes to misinformation, disinformation, and distortion of the realities, distortion of the facts, that's a really scary proposition. How do we regulate it? Should we regulate it? I mean, these are conversations that we're not having. Look, I'm not an out-and-out libertarian. I'm not a let everything go wild type of bloke. I'm just not. I think there needs to be some sort of boundaries, some sort of parameters put around AI, particularly in the way that it can influence the way people's thinking, particularly in the way it can potentially distort truth. I mean, what is truth these days? I mean, the left says that truth is objective, it's what you think it is. But if it's a computer program basically using that type of thinking, that's really, really a worrying thought, I think, not for people, not just on the right of centre, but on the left of centre as well.
Well, let me put it to you this way, and this is something that Conservatives don't pay enough attention to. Very soon we'll have a whole generation who does not read books. They don't go to the library. They've never seen a real history book. So when they go and ask, hey, can you show me a photograph of, let's just say, the Vikings, and they get given images from ChatGPT of black men, tribal-looking men, and that's supposed to be a Nordic history of the Vikings, that means that their perception of history will now be wrong. It will be moderated and rewritten by algorithms. And also, it's not just in that one example, it's thousands of examples all around the internet. Surely the rewriting of our history by algorithms written by basically racist people in Silicon Valley, that's going to have a detrimental effect on the entire story of humanity going forward as it becomes written by the digital medium.
Well, that's exactly what I said, except you said it about 1,000 times better. Yes, look, I think it is a real problem, and you know, I'm not the most religious man in the world. I will say that I'm not computer literate. I'm not overly religious, but I believe in moral values. But certainly, I think that Pontius Pilate during the Passion of Jesus when he asked, what is truth? I mean, that's a question I think we all have to ask ourselves. And in dealing with artificial intelligence, in dealing with the fact that it can be not only used but abused by those who want to distort reality, who want to actually implant false realities in particularly younger people's minds. And as you say, I mean, few people are reading books these days, but when you find, as I read this week, that the main source of news for people under 25 is actually TikTok, of all things. This is actually a very serious question. And certainly if the younger generation is going to go, well, age and become, well, people like me, really, old farts who basically think they rule the world, when they actually do rule the world in 10, 20, 30 years' time, and if their minds have been infected, if their minds have been destroyed, effectively their critical judgment has been destroyed by what they've been assimilating through artificial intelligence and manipulated artificial intelligence at that, then I think there is a real problem for our entire Western civilization. I don't think I'm overstating it.
No, I don't think you are either, Terry. Look, and thank you so much for joining us here today. This is a conversation I think we'll have a few more times this year.
I think not just this year, but I think for years to come, Alexandra. Thanks very much.
And if you want to subscribe to Terry's morning emails, you can do so straight from the website at spectator.com.au.